The Kavanaugh hearings, his confirmation to the Supreme Court, and the aftermath dominated the first 24 editions of Bill Whittle Now, the newest show at BillWhittle.com. Here are some highlights from those intense episodes recorded between September 17 and October 8, 2018.
The entire modus operandi of the progressive left has been very simple. This is all political correctness is. Use the decency of the person you're attacking to make that person shut up, because even at the cost of the country, the pain of being slandered like this is so enormous that virtually everybody does shut up. I think this is an example, a good example, of the American people seeing just how not only desperate, but just how nasty these people are. I personally now, after having a day or two to think about it, I think this is it's gonna explode in their faces in a big way. Listen, I'm going to say this for the sake of the argument to make it very clear. Maybe it happened, and maybe it didn't happen. This isn't the first time in all of human history that we've had this kind of conflict, you know. Our entire society has been set up to deal with these kind of conflicts. One person says one thing, another person says something else. Somebody says, you murdered that guy. The other guy says, I didn't do it. How do we know what to do? Well, over the course of 2,000, 3,000 years of civilization, we've come to figure out a few things. And one of them is to apply a set of rules. And these rules are supposed to be standardized. They're supposed to be above the level of emotion. And in America, the first of those rules is you are innocent until you are proven guilty. Now, needless to say, this woman did not prove that he was guilty. She didn't prove anything.
One writer I read today, I believe in Politico.com, basically said what she proved was that she wasn't a shill, she wasn't a Democrat plant, she wasn't an actor, and that she came across as believable. And Bill, I think the argument can be made that is all she needed to do because it is not a court case.
Well, you could make that argument in post-truth America, in post-law America, yes. You could make the argument that, oh, she cried very convincingly, I'm sure he must have done it. I'm not saying, I wasn't there, you weren't there, Scott. That's why we have the law, for God's sake, right? You weren't there, I wasn't there, then nobody on that committee was there, no one was there. That's why when somebody says one thing and somebody says something else, the burden of proof is on the person making the accusation. Do we have the presumption of innocence in this country or not? And the left doesn't want us to have the presumption of innocence, because if the presumption of innocence exists, then they have to actually prove these outrageous charges and not simply make them. This is life or death for the Democrats. They cannot get people to vote for their policies. That's why they never talk about their policies. So they can't get a majority of the Congress. They can't get the presidency. They can't do things the right way. And every single thing that they've accomplished in the last 40 years has been accomplished by convincing five people, that this is what has to happen. They've turned the Supreme Court into something that overturns legislation that is legally enacted by the Congress. It was never the Supreme Court's role. And all of this comes down to, is there a law left, yes or no? Because if there's not a law left, then he's not going to be confirmed. What is it that they're trying to do here? They're trying to make the entire rule of law obsolete, because, Scott, if this comes down to an emotional vote instead of the fact that it simply should have been thrown out in the first place, it was thrown out in the first place. They didn't play the card. They had the card, they didn't play it. We know that we know let's stop screwing around. Let's stop screwing around. It's about abortion. It's about Roe versus Wade. It's about a desperate attempt to find anything that you can throw into the machine's gears to postpone this thing past the election and presumably postpone it until Donald Trump runs in 2020. It's simply so transparent. But if it turns out that Kavanaugh doesn't make it, and even if he does, this election now in November is the Kavanaugh election. And the election will be about, it's not going to be about Supreme Court picks. It's not going to be about holding the Congress. It's not going to be about any of that stuff. It's going to be about, is there a rule of law left in America, yes or no? And if you're one of those people who are horrified and shocked by what you see, then it's just a matter of time until they come for you. They've come for me already. And it's not a fun trip, by the way. So if you don't get out and vote all the way down the ticket and grab everybody else you get and get out there and vote down the ticket, then we'll have deserved what's coming for us. This is my favorite part of the argument is, well, first of all, you can see just by Booker's just by what Booker said, you can see the Democratic position falling apart. He's a rapist. Nah, nobody believes her, really. She can't even place the date, time, state. No, sorry. Okay, well, then he's an alcoholic. Come on, man. The guy had some beers at a college party. Well, then he's unfit to serve because he's so angry. And here's the thing that is so illuminating about the anger charges on Kavanaugh, Scotty. I suspect that most of these are, as everything else, simple political weapons that they're casting out. They know full well he responded appropriately. But I also do think that among people like Cory Booker and Dianne Feinstein and Chucky, Schmucky Schumer and all the rest of them, the idea that your honor could be offended is so alien to their way of thinking that they simply don't understand it. They are so their lack of morality is so triumphant in their lives. That's a nice phrase, actually. That the idea that somebody might be morally outraged about something real rather than faux moral outrage about how women are not being believed and all the rest of this nonsense, the fact that somebody might be outraged about having their character defamed is the wonderment of people who have no character to defame. Therefore, so what you're saying is, and this makes sense to them, that graduating from the premier law school in the United States, which it was at the time he graduated, by the way, disqualifies you from being a justice on the Supreme Court. And this is the logic, sorry. I'd like to apologize to thousands and thousands of years of moral philosophers for chucking that word in there and dirtying it up. Sorry about that. This is the reasoning. There, I did it again. This is the MO of people who understand that a person who understands the Constitution will stop people like Cory Booker from their power grab and their social engineering.
What do you see happening in the court in the years to come with regard to abortion, to gun rights, to free speech?
I think we might be able to make America great again. Scott, this one vote for Kavanaugh is the fulcrum of the progressive power. They cannot get their legislation past the American people. They do their best to cover it up and they still can't get it passed. And since they can't get what they want through the legislature, they can do it through executive order. And if they can't get it done through the legislature and executive order, all of the destruction of this country is predicated on the destruction of the rule of the Constitution as the law of the land. And the one institution that is actually able to accomplish that is the Supreme Court. I don't believe that's what the court's original purpose was, but put that aside for a minute. What that really means is that the progressives can rule America if they can get 5 people to agree with them. And what that really means is progressives can rule America if they can get 1 person to agree with them. If it's 4-4 and there's a swing vote, then that 1 person, in this particular case, Brett Kavanaugh, is the most powerful person in America. By far. And if that person becomes a conservative, then the progressives no longer have the power they need in order to enforce this social engineering change they're so anxious to bring about. If the Democrats think that all of a sudden every woman in the country is now weaponized against the Republicans, I think they're in for a bit of a shock. I think by any margin of what I'm seeing on the ground, the much larger social movement has been from people who considered themselves Democrats who are so incensed by this, over to the let's just say the non-democratic part of the equation, than any fence sitters who may have actually suddenly believed, that Republicans are evil now that they saw what happened, with Brett Kavanaugh. So this is their power, Scott. This is the lever. This is the lever of progressive power in America, and we just went a long, long way to sawing that lever off down by the floor there. It says so much about the times we live in when a major news organization writes not a fluff piece, just a simple statement of fact about what this president has accomplished without spinning it into the mud. I was gobsmacked. it's possible now, I think, and I think the reason that CNN story maybe appeared was that Trump's achievements are they're just so obvious. You can't ignore them anymore. You can't pretend they didn't happen. And while you can pretend that Trump is a terrible president and do all of these stories about what a catastrophe he is, when you've got 4% plus growth economic rate, when you've got a second summit with North Korea where Kim Jong-un has said, please bring your inspectors so that you can see that we've shut down our nuclear facility, when we've got a deal with China that China doesn't like, when we've got a deal with Mexico and Canada that's better than the deal we had before, and on and on and on and on and on. You become a laughing stock if you don't point these things out. I'm not saying they're there yet, but I am saying that Trump's achievements are so enormous. And if we stay fired up and give him, at very least, hold the House and Senate, I think we are looking at a completely rejuvenated Republican Party. But it is possible that some people in the news media are beginning to get the feel that a lot of Americans got watching the Kavanaugh confirmation, a lot of Democrats, I should say, where anecdotally we're hearing that large numbers of Democrats just said, I don't want to be associated with this anymore. I don't want to be associated with a simple accusation destroying a man's life without any evidence. I don't want to be on the team that's burning down universities and dragging people out of the car and kicking them with, black jackboots. I don't want to be on that team anymore. It's possible. I don't expect that that CNN or New York Times is going to switch to being Republicans, but it's possible that they are beginning to realize what we've realized, a decade ago, not only through paying attention, but through our love of history. It's possible that some of these people may be actually beginning to realize what it is they've created. What your people did was so transparently naked and awful, was so low and so demeaning and so frankly terrifying to the future of this country that not only are not women going to line up behind the blue Democrat grievance machine, but you have shown a lot of people, a lot of women especially, what your party is capable of doing when the stakes are high enough. So I say you bring your blue wave, we'll bring our red wave, and we'll see what happens. I can tell you this, for people who are already at that fever amped pitch of tearing at the walls of the Supreme Court and screaming in the Senate, I'm sure those people are still screaming, and I'm sure they're still hysterical, and I'm sure they're still breaking down windows, and I'm sure they're still marching through the streets, and I'm sure all of those people who you say are so fired up are still fired up. I have no doubt about that. But what you're about to discover, I think, and I hope, what the actual silent majority of this country is all about. I have never seen Republicans this angry. I've never seen Republicans this united. I've never wanted to vote so much in my life personally as I do in November. I didn't want to vote this much for Trump. I didn't want to vote this much for Romney or McCain or anything. This is the most angry I've ever been. And for their side, which is perennially angry and perennially in the streets and perennially protesting and constantly shrieking and screaming and moaning at the top of their hysterical lungs, if you're trying to tell me that those hysterical people are hysterically angry, and this is some kind of newsflash, I'm not too impressed. But I will tell you one thing. The silent middle of this country, and I'm not talking about the Republican middle of this country, I mean the quiet middle of the country that doesn't pay too much attention to either side of politics, saw what happened in Washington last week, was mortified, terrified, appalled, ashamed, and humiliated by it. And I think they are active in a way that they've not been active in my lifetime, certainly not in my political lifetime. So we will see.
Well, whether it's a blue wave or a red tide, Bill Whittle will be here commenting on it 5 days a week. We appreciate the support of the members at BillWhittle.com who make this show possible through their monthly contributions. It's just $9.95 a month. You can become a member now, become part of that citizen producer crew. If you want to make sure that you don't miss a single episode of this, if you're on YouTube, click that little Liberty Bell notification button and we'll send you an email every time we post a new episode. And as always, we appreciate all of our friends who are sharing and liking and distributing this material. Almost all that we do here at BillWhittle.com is made available to the general public because our members like it that way. And we just have a few episodes that we keep for members only. And even then, members complain that we should share them with the general public. We appreciate the people who make this possible. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making everything happen here.